Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. We begin this hour with a breaking news story from India. An Air India flight en route from Ahmedabad to London has crashed shortly after takeoff. The Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, operating as flight AI-171, took off from Ahmedabad at around 1:38 p.m. local time. Just 5 minutes later, it went down in a residential area called Meghani Nagar. Thick smoke and dust could be seen for miles. Images we have shared a few moments ago appear to show an explosion with a fireball upon the plane impacting. On board, we understand that there were 242 people, including 230 adults, 2 infants and 12 crew members. The pilot in command has been identified as Sumit Sabharwal, with co-pilot Clive Kunda. Airport officials say the last signal from the aircraft came at 8:51 UTC, just seconds after liftoff. The Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport has been shut down and all flights are temporarily suspended. Just to bring you in, these are live visuals from the scene of this tragic incident where a passenger plane has crashed shortly after liftoff in a residential area. The smoke still in the air, flames still being put out by emergency service officials. We know that several emergency groups have descended on the scene and more will be coming. This apocalyptic scene that we're currently showing you is in the aftermath of a tragic event. We bring you some breaking news and a big update following this devastating plane crash. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to the Minister of Civil Aviation, Ramahan Naidu, and taken stock of the Air India flight crash incident in Ahmedabad. The Minister informed the Prime Minister that he is rushing to Ahmedabad to oversee rescue and relief operations on the ground. The Prime Minister has directed the Minister to ensure all necessary support is extended immediately, and he's asked to be kept regularly updated on the situation. All relevant agencies are on high alert and coordinated efforts are underway. The office of Ramahan Naidu reporting that these visuals we are showing you giving a clear picture. This isn't just a plane crash with potential ramifications for hundreds on board, as we show you an item being pulled away. Not clear exactly what was being shown there, but I'll come back to my point. This is a residential area in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, where the plane has crashed. A situation on the ground of extreme uncertainty and potential extreme tragedy. These images, these visuals are showing you the extent of devastation on the ground at this current moment. Not just on the ground, not just to the plane, but also to the surrounding buildings. I clarify, this is a residential area where the crash has taken place. 242 people, as far as we are aware, on board this plane, including infants and staff. A rescue operation is underway. I hope we can bring you now a visual. I just want to bring you into a disturbing but necessary video that we need to play you, showing the moment that this plane has hit this residential area, recorded from a nearby building. I hope in a few moments we will have that for you. Just if you are joining us to bring you in to what has happened. A passenger jet flying from Ahmedabad in Gujarat, India, to London Gatwick in the United Kingdom has crashed a few minutes after taking off. And here is that visual. We can see the plane slowly descending towards the ground. and then a huge explosion. A fireball with smoke and dust being thrust into the air. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reportedly taken stock, spoken with the aviation minister. We're waiting for a response from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Of course, this flight going from India to the United Kingdom. We will continue to bring you all updates that we have on this incident as we get them. This is an evolving situation. We will be the first place to bring you that breaking news as we get it, as rescue operations continue. Moving on now, China has confirmed a new trade deal struck with the United States following a phone call between President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping. The agreement marks a delicate truce in the ongoing trade war between the world's two largest economies. China's foreign ministry says both sides must now stick to the consensus. Spokesperson Lin Jian stressed that China has always kept its word and delivered results. Let's listen in to what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian has had to say.
强调，本次会议是在两国元首的战略指引下举行的，双方就落实两国元首6月5日通话重要共识和巩固日内瓦经贸会谈成果的措施框架达成原则一致，就解决双方彼此经贸关切，中方一向言必行，行必果。既然达成了共识，双方都应遵守。希望美方同中方一道，落实两国元首通话达成的重要共识，发挥中美经贸磋商机制作用，通过沟通对话增进共识，减少误解，加强合作。
Well, the Trump-Xi phone call has broke a deadlock that had escalated just weeks after a preliminary deal was reached in Geneva. Follow-up talks in London have helped add substance to that agreement. China has also announced a new envoy for Eurasian affairs as diplomatic efforts intensify. Meanwhile, China's Commerce Ministry says it will continue to speed up approvals for rare earth exports, a key move amid global supply pressures. Beijing hopes Washington will now work together to implement what both leaders have agreed to. Well, joining us to discuss this news update that we have had, confirmation of a deal struck between the United States and China, is Stephen Nagy, an Indo-Pacific area expert who is joining us from Tokyo. Stephen, thank you ever so much for being here. Of course, confirmation of this deal will have ramifications for both the US and China, but given Trump's tariff policy and his tariff action, how significant is this to the wider world?
Well, I think the wider world is definitely relieved that the two parties have come and met in London and have initially at least agreed to a framework of a cessation in the trade frictions that is happening between the two, and that they may be coming to an agreement is of great relief to countries that really can't separate their economies from the United States and China. And here I'm thinking about South Korea, Japan, and many other countries that really both partners are incredibly important for their economic stability and prosperity. At the same hand, I think many countries are looking at the negotiations as likely the first stage or the first act in a multiple act play in which both parties cheat, both parties accuse each other of cheating, and at the end of the day, one will backtrack or one will argue that the other is not fulfilling their obligations. So I think there's some relief, but looking at past behavior by both the Trump administration and the Chinese, I think most are expecting that this will only be a temporary pause in trade friction, and we're likely to see more trade friction from here on in.
Yes, Stephen, let's build briefly on that friction that you've spoken about. Of course, a framework was agreed to in Geneva, Switzerland, where days of negotiations took place, and we saw a tariff reduction from that triple-digit reciprocal tariffs that had been escalated to. Is there a risk here that there will be potential calls of violations of this deal? And how quickly do you think that these tensions could break this deal apart, given the differences that both nations have, not just in terms of trade policy, but also on other geopolitical issues?
Well, frankly, both sides have incentive to come to some kind of agreement and reduce tariffs and create access to rare earth materials that are essential for most of the high-tech equipment that we use in the United States or Canada, where I'm from, or other parts of the world. So again, I think that's really important. From the Chinese side, they're very, very concerned that the tariffs will continue and it will have a double punch of their economy. The tariffs have decreased exports by about 35% in China, and that means those millions and millions of workers on the East Coast that are producing goods for global export may be losing their jobs. When they lose their jobs, they're not bringing that capital back to their hometowns during Chinese New Year and helping with the development of their hometowns. So it's a double punch on their economy. On the U.S. side, of course, we haven't seen effects on inflation yet, but businesses are generally growing insecure about the tensions in the tariff policy, which seems erratic from many different quarters. So I think there's definite incentive to find some kind of stability. But again, the geopolitical competition between these two states and the technological competition is still deepening, and we're likely to see again things like territorial disputes, things like human rights issues, things like who is and what technologies are being allowed into China from the United States and allies to resurface as areas of wedge politics that are going to create problems for, I think, really pushing this trade agreement into reality for the long term.
Yes, and Stephen, to bring an end to this discussion, rare earth minerals is something that has been spoken about by both China and the United States. A key point of contention, the Chinese Foreign Ministry confirming that they will fast-track approvals for the sale of these rare earth minerals. For our audience, can you provide some context on why this is such an important part of these discussions and deal that's been agreed to?
Well, China basically has monopolized rare earth supply. So they have about 60% of global rare earth supplies, and they are involved in about 90% of the processing of rare earth materials. Now, rare earth materials are they're not so rare, but the processing process is a little bit difficult, and few countries do it cheaply well. And what we think is that this rare earth material that goes into these super sophisticated semiconductors that go into our cars, our Teslas, our iPhones, our computers. So with China being able to monopolize these rare earth supplies and the processing, either cut off the processing and export or slow it down, it fundamentally affects our ability to increase production of these key technologies to compete in the areas of AI that require these key semiconductors that use rare earth materials. So they are in the driver's seat. They've invested heavily in monopolizing rare earth materials, and we are likely to see this rare earth material card surface again. But at the same time, you use that card once, it's more difficult to use it twice. And this is what we saw back in 2010 when the Chinese used rare earth embargoes against Japan. Japan found alternative sources for rare earths. They reduced their exposure to Chinese rare earth material processing, and this has allowed to given them more space to manage the monopoly that China has. So again, you play this card once, you're going to have declining benefit the second and third time around.
Stephen Nagy, thank you ever so much for providing that insight and expertise. We will, of course, bring you all of the reactions from that deal that has been confirmed between China and the United States. But we now move on, and as tensions are running high between the US and Iran, Iran has reaffirmed its commitment to uranium enrichment despite heightened regional tensions and warnings of a possible Israeli military strike. A senior Iranian official told that Tehran had received intelligence from a friendly regional country about a potential Israeli attack aimed at disrupting Iran's nuclear stance ahead of talks with the US on Sunday in Muscat, Oman. The official said the pressure campaign is designed to force Iran to abandon its nuclear rights, a move Tehran is unwilling to make. We don't want tensions and prefer diplomacy, but our armed forces are fully prepared to respond to any military strike. That from the Tehran official. The US has said it will not allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon, with President Donald Trump ordering the relocation of American personnel out of the region due to potential threats. The upcoming Amman meeting marks a sixth round of indirect negotiations with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff expected to bridge gaps. Key among them, Iran's refusal to scrap uranium enrichment and Washington's reluctance to lift sanctions imposed after Trump exited the 2015 nuclear deal. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has rejected the latest US proposal, pledging to continue enrichment on Iranian soil, which the West views as a potential path to nuclear weapons. Iran maintains that its program is strictly for civilian, energy and research purposes. Sunday's meeting in Muscat could prove pivotal, but both sides appear entrenched in their positions, leaving a breakthrough uncertain. Several developments there. Joining us to discuss them, Jordan Cope, a Middle East expert who was joining us from Erfurt in Germany. Jordan, there is a lot for us to discuss. Let's first look at this potential Israeli attack on Iran. There were reports from the United States overnight. Iran now themselves saying that a friendly nation has said that an Israeli attack could be imminent. Also, on a related note, potentially related note, we've seen Donald Trump saying that there will be a removal and a movement of some US troops in the region. Is this an early stage of a potential severe escalation in a conflict that has ran over time but has not been direct in terms of fighting between the US and Iran?
It's certainly an indicator that something is changing. This is very unusual activity for the Middle East, and it ultimately could be a boiling point and a culmination of a war started by Iran's proxies, one by one of which has lost more and more power throughout the war that was started on October 7th, 2023, when Iran's proxies and Hamas and the Islamic Jihad invaded Israel, killed 1,200 people, and then prompted other Iranian proxies, such as the Houthis, to get involved, blocking the Red Sea and stopping shipping from going through. And Hezbollah, which at the time, which had a 150,000 rocket stockpile, which was involved in the war, sending masses of rockets into Israel. And so what we're seeing right now is ultimately the collision of giants, ultimately, in this war, potentially between Israel and Iran. Iran has been developing nuclear weapons now for years. It was discovered approximately 2 decades ago that it had tested nuclear implosion tests. This only came out recently. And what also came out recently is that Iran, which is threatened to destroy Israel, was ultimately found to have had uranium detections of uranium traces in facilities that Iran previously claimed there was no nuclear enrichment going on, prompting the IAEA ultimately to pass a resolution declaring Iran in breach of its non-proliferation duties. And so we're ultimately seeing a significant escalation by Iran, which has now survived 6 rounds of nuclear negotiations with the US, which has refused to stop its enrichment program. It has some stockpiles enriched to 60% uranium, which is incredibly, overwhelmingly overboard, when a nuclear energy program simply needs stockpiles enriched to 3.67%. And it's believed that Iran has continued in these negotiations so that it can diversify and move its nuclear weapon resources throughout the country to make it more difficult to attack in the future.
Yes, absolutely. You did bring that update in there. The UN's nuclear watchdog has released a finding, a resolution. Iran have responded to that resolution. For some context, they've called it a political resolution and said that they will have to respond. Jordan, moving on from that and looking at these discussions, these indirect talks set to take place in Amman, a further round of discussions. How pivotal are these if further escalation is to be avoided, given the comments that have been made by Iran, the United States, and a potential attack from Israel?
We'll see what ultimately happens, but it's important to consider the Iranian regime's ultimate motives, which not only is supporting Shiite Islamist proxies throughout the Middle East and sometimes even Sunni Islamist proxies, at least so long as they're devoted to Israel's destruction. Iran ultimately, a nuclear bomb would very much potential the Iranian regime's stability for the long term. If you think about some of the worst autocracies in the world, a path to a nuclear weapon is a path ultimately to stability, as we've seen in North Korea. And Iran in recent years has certainly suffered in terms of political stability, as we saw in the Mahsa Amini protest, which brought the country to a temporary standstill. Those were some of the most powerful protests that we've seen in recent years. And Iran, of course, is a country very divided by many different ethnic groups throughout the country. You have Baluchis, you have Kurds, you have Azeris, you have even some Arabs in Kuznetstan. And so Iran ultimately realizes that political stability is a difficult project to maintain, especially when many Iranians are also secular-minded. And having a nuclear weapon ultimately will deter outside interference from Iranian politics, from which local groups might need help in order to protest successfully in the future.
Jordan Cope, thank you ever so much for your time and your insight. We, of course, will bring you all the latest in those developments ongoing between US, Iran, Israel tensions, and bring you in ahead of those discussions set to take place in Oman. We bring you some more breaking news now, and India's top ministers are rushing to Ahmedabad after this major aviation incident. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to both Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu and Home Minister Amit Shah, directing them to head to the crash site immediately. The situation is being treated with utmost urgency. This situation, of course, a developing one, but to bring you in if you are just joining us, an Air India flight in Gujarat, Ahmedabad, Gujarat, has crashed around 5 minutes after taking off. The flight was due to land in London. Gatwick was the airport. Of course, London in the United Kingdom. The visuals that we have been showing you, giving you an image and a picture of the live scenes, also the moment that the plane hit a residential area in Ahmedabad. We know that 242 people were on board. We have received some more information about the passengers. This flight took off at 13:38, 8:38 local Indian Standard Time. We've had confirmation that it was carrying 242 passengers and crew members. This on board the 7878 aircraft. The passengers, we have had a breakdown confirming the nationality of those on board. 169 people on board this flight, Indian nationals. 53 are British nationals, 1 Canadian and 7 Portuguese nationals also on the flight which has crashed. Confirmation that injured people are being taken to the nearest hospital. Had reports that Air India is giving full cooperation to authorities investigating this incident, a situation that is currently evolving. More information is coming through minute by minute. The situation is, of course, a serious one. The tragedy, not just of those on the flight, potentially a loss of life for those on the ground. A residential area has been hit. We've shown you visuals, and hopefully we will continue to show you visuals of buildings at this crash site. Blackened high-rise buildings. We've also shown you images of parts of the plane still intact, but with smoke and fire coming from this crash site. Here we go, just showing you now a clear damaged building, a blackened building. We've also had an image of part of a plane looking like it is situated on top of a residential building. A tragic incident that is taking place. A tragic situation that is unfolding on the ground. Conversations with Indian ministers, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, have taken place. a serious situation at play, and we will continue to bring you updates on that. We do have some more information actually coming in right now for you. India's Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has expressed shock over the Ahmedabad flight crash. Jaishankar offered prayers for the passengers and their families as rescue efforts continue on the ground. This sentiment of prayers, this sentiment of hope for those injured, potential safety for some. The situation, of course, is unclear. We've broken down, of course, 242 passengers on board. Extremely disturbing images. We know an investigation has begun. It's an extremely rare situation that 5 minutes after takeoff, a flight crashes, especially into a residential area. We've spoken with experts earlier in the hour who have said to us that a serious investigation will need to be underway. Experts have told us that checks will have happened on engines. It appears that there was smoke coming from the engines before the plane crashed. We've also heard that a Mayday message from air traffic control was not responded to. The last message came just after takeoff. This situation, an extreme one. Of course, this isn't just impacting India. This is being felt across the world. Nationals that are Indian, but also British, Canadian, Portuguese. This truly is a devastating and tragic incident, and more information will come through. We will update you on that. This, an image we are showing you from shortly after the impact, showing parts of the plane still intact. Smoke coming from the wreckage, dust into the air as well. This is an involving situation, a severe and serious situation that will have ramifications. Bringing you another breaking piece of information. Air India have released a statement. They say Air India confirms that flight AI 171 from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick was involved in an accident today after takeoff. The flight, which departed from Ahmedabad at 1:38 p.m. Indian Standard Time, was carrying 242 passengers and crew members on board the Boeing 787-8 aircraft. Of these, 169 are Indian nationals, 53 are British nationals, 1 Canadian national and 7 Portuguese national. The injured are being taken to nearby hospitals. This, an Air India statement, they say we have also set up a dedicated passenger hotline number. Just to read that out to you, it is 1-800-5691 444. Just to confirm again, 1-800-5691 444. That has been set up to provide more information about this tragedy that has just unfolded. Air India continue to say in their statement that they are giving its full cooperation to the authorities investigating this incident, and that Air India will release further information via regular updates on social media and also on its website. This situation continuing to unfold. We're waiting for some global reaction. Of course, we've had confirmation now that passengers, not just Indian on this flight, more than 50 British passengers on board, 7 Portuguese nationals and 1 Canadian national also on board. If you are just joining us, we're covering some breaking news that happened a short while ago at 1:38 Indian Standard Time. AI 171 took off from the Ahmedabad airport in Gujarat, flying to London Gatwick in the United Kingdom, and has crashed around 5 minutes after takeoff. We've had reports of black smoke being seen from the engines. We've also shown you images of the moment of impact. This passenger jet carrying 242 people on board, including staff, pilots and we know that 2 infants as well were on board, has crashed into a residential area in Gujarat. Several injured people have been rushed to a local hospital. An emergency hotline has been set up. Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India has been in contact with the Minister of Home Affairs and also the Aviation Minister. This situation is an evolving one. More information will come through. But this is an incident of tragedy. There is a potential for loss of life on the plane. We have to be realistic. Of course, prayers and hopes are there for the recovery effort, but also this plane was in a residential area. We've seen apparent building damage in the local area. Also shown you visuals from the wreckage where emergency services are working to try and put out this fire and assist in an operation effort wherever they can. An evolving situation, a difficult situation, but one where hopes and prayers are needed. A dark moment, an unforeseen moment, and an irregular tragedy taking place shortly after liftoff. We will, of course, continue to bring you more updates. So we have had further updates now. I just bring this to you now. Of course, I mentioned that 53 passengers on this flight that was going to London Gatwick in the United Kingdom, 53 of the passengers were British. We've had comment from the UK Foreign Office. They say that the UK is working with local authorities in India to urgently establish the facts and provide support to those involved. Just to confirm, the UK Foreign Office has said that the UK is working with local authorities in India to urgently establish the facts and provide support to those involved. I bring you some more information now as we continue to show you visuals from this tragic event. We've had reports that the Air India plane has crashed on a hostel building for doctors. This from a police official. This flash that we are getting in, just bringing you in with the latest information that we have. Of course, we wait for concrete confirmation. But police officials saying that the Air India plane has crashed on a hostel building for doctors. The potential loss of life, not just on the plane, but also in the civilian area of Ahmedabad, where the plane has crashed, flying from Gujarat to London, India to the United Kingdom. This happening shortly after takeoff, which was 2 hours ago right now. We're showing you live visuals, but 2 hours ago exactly, this AI-171 flight took off from Gujarat, took off from Ahmedabad. Around 5 minutes later, this crash took place. We continue to show you these live visuals. Efforts by emergency services are ongoing. The smoke is visible. Clearly, the situation on the ground will be a difficult one to ascertain right away. We've had reports that injured bodies and injured people have been taken to hospital. We wait for confirmation on that, but this a clear visual representation of what we are seeing. Apocalyptic scenes right now. Debris across the ground. We've shown you images of debris seemingly not just on the ground, but also potentially on buildings as well. Parts of the plane. We're showing you these visuals right here. Devastating scenes. Devastation as well for so many, uncertainty for so many. Families, loved ones, currently in this moment. Our thoughts and prayers go out to them. The thoughts and prayers from across the world go out to them. Britain offering to help. I bring you a further update. The Adani Group's Gautam Adani has said that they're working closely with all authorities and extending full support to the families on the ground. This is an evolving situation, but a devastating one. These live visuals that we are showing you of the crash site. We've shown you earlier a video of the moment that the plane struck this civilian area. We understand, we're waiting for confirmation, but we have reports that a police official has said that the Air India plane crashed on a hostel building for doctors. Smoke in the air, as these fires are being put out. A horrific situation with ramifications globally. Just to bring you back in if you are just joining us. Around 2 hours ago, an Air India flight from Ahmedabad to London crashed around 5 minutes after takeoff. It's crashed, as we understand, onto a hostel building for doctors in a civilian area. We know that 242 people, including crew and pilots, were on board. We understand that there were 2 minors. We wait for confirmation on that, but to bring you in on the people on board, we understand that 169 of those on board were Indian nationals, 53 British nationals, 1 Canadian national and 7 Portuguese nationals. This disturbing image, a necessary one to understand the severity of this situation. A civilian area, a plane crashing into that, and a fireball afterwards. A moment of tragedy. To bring you another update as we show you these extremely distressing and disturbing scenes. Boeing has said that they are aware of initial reports and are working to gather more information. Boeing, of course, it was a Boeing 787-8 plane that crashed around 5 minutes after takeoff. That takeoff was at 1:38 p.m. Indian Standard Time. This is a live visual right now that we're getting from Ahmedabad in Gujarat. The sheer level of devastation. You can see the building charred with black marks potentially from the smoke. Damage to that building. Global hopes and prayers are there, not just for those on board as the rescue efforts continue, but for those on the ground in the residential area at the time. Let's just bring you back in, bring you some information. We have had an update from the Ministry of Civil Aviation. An operational control room has been activated at the Ministry of Civil Aviation to coordinate all details. Contact numbers have been given. I will read those out to you now. If you're in the area, if you saw what happened, this a number, contact number for the Ministry of Civil Aviation, 011 2461 0843. Just to reiterate, that was 011 246 10843. Another number has been provided, 965 039 1859. Situation still unfolding, these live visuals on the ground. It seems that the smoke is starting to be dispersed after firefighting efforts on the ground have been ongoing to put out this fire. Almost 2 hours ago to the minute, this AI 171 flight heading from Ahmedabad in Gujarat to London crashed into this residential area that we are showing you right now. Efforts, of course, from emergency service people who are doing their best to assist in the recovery. But the situation is a concerning one for those on the ground. To bring you back in, we have started getting through global reactions. First, from the United Kingdom. Of course, 53 people on board of this flight were British. And the UK Foreign Office has said that it is working with local authorities in India to urgently establish the facts and provide support to those involved. We're also getting another response now through from Thierry Mathieu, who is the ambassador of France to India. A few moments ago, he has posted on social media saying that France is deeply saddened by reports of a plane crash in Ahmedabad. Our thoughts are with the victims and their loved ones. We express our full solidarity at this time. More global reactions are expected. Hopes and prayers from across the globe going on currently. These visuals, extremely disturbing. Rescue efforts ongoing. Luggage being pulled from the wreckage. Bits of bodywork were visible in pictures. We wait to see the situation after that fire has been put out. Of course, a huge fireball that we've been showing you. To bring you in another update now, we've had a comment from the UK Foreign Minister David Lammy. He says that the UK is working with local authorities in India to urgently establish the facts and provide support. This echoing the message from the UK Foreign Office. 53 passengers, British nationals, 169 Indian nationals, 7 Portuguese nationals and 1 Canadian. This flight's going from Gujarat to London, Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. Further comment from the UK Foreign Minister David Lammy, saying he is deeply saddened by the news of this devastating plane crash in Ahmedabad. These visuals are difficult to watch, but showing you the severity of this incident that has currently happened and rescue operations that are ongoing. If you are just joining us, an Air India passenger flight from Ahmedabad to London has crashed around 5 minutes after takeoff. The flight took off at around 1:38 p.m. Indian Standard Time, but around 5 minutes after takeoff, the plane crashed into a residential area. Early reports, which we are yet to confirm from police officers, say that the plane crashed into a hostel which was housing doctors. These live visuals we're showing you, the damage to nearby properties is evident. The wreckage on the ground is devastating. The situation is tragic. Hopes and prayers from across the world. Rescue efforts. Hope is the big word. Hundreds of people on board, a civilian area impacted by this crash. Hope is the clear message in this moment. To bring you another breaking update. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said his thoughts are with the passengers and families of those on the Air India flight, which was bound for London Gatwick and crashed in Ahmedabad. Keir Starmer says the scenes emerging of a London-bound plane carrying many British nationals crashing in the Indian city of Ahmedabad are devastating. I'm being kept updated as the situation develops, and my thoughts are with the passengers and their families at this deeply distressing time. We know Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken with senior Indian officials, including Amit Shah and the Aviation Minister. Updates will be coming through to us. The situation is an evolving one as rescue efforts continue. As rescue efforts continue and we continue to provide you those live visuals, let's go back and inform you on what we know so far. It's been just over an hour since we first reported an Indian plane crash, an Air India plane crashed near the airport in Ahmedabad. Here is what we know so far. There were 242 people on board, including 2 pilots and 10 cabin crew staff. Of the passengers, there were 169 Indian nationals, 53 British nationals, 7 Portuguese nationals and 1 Canadian national. The plane, a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, gave a mayday call to air traffic control after taking off, but then gave no response. Signal was lost seconds after takeoff when the plane had reached 625 feet, according to flight radar. The plane came down in a residential area near the airport. We understand, we've had reports from police officials that it landed on a hostel housing doctors. These live visuals giving you a representation of the scenes on the ground. Had confirmed conversations that have taken place between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Home Minister Amit Shah. Bringing you some more news, and the Air India profile on social media has gone black. This a dark day. Continuing hope and prayers for the rescue efforts are coming in. Just to bring you another global reaction that we have had from Denis Alipov, the Russian ambassador to India. He has said on social media, heartbreaking news is coming from Ahmedabad. My heartfelt sympathy to the families and near ones of the victims, and to all Indian people and the government of India over this tragic major catastrophe. A tragedy we've had experts on earlier who say that this situation is extremely rare. A tragedy on this scale is uncommon. Checks on the aircraft will have taken place. Just to bring you back in, I have some more information that has just come through to me. We've had a statement from the DGCA, India's aviation regulator, which says the flight crashed immediately after takeoff from Ahmedabad. There were 242 people on board the aircraft. This confirming information we have already brought to you, including 2 pilots and 10 cabin crew. Some more information, the captain had 8,200 hours of flying experience. The co-pilots had 1,100 hours of flying experience. The aircraft departed from Ahmedabad at 1:39 Indian Standard Time, 1:39 p.m. from runway 23. It gave a mayday call to air traffic control, but thereafter no response was given by the aircraft. After departure, the plane crashed outside of the airport perimeter. We'll bring you now some more information. On the aircraft itself. The Air India crash AI-171 is the first time that a Boeing 787 aircraft has come down in this manner. The model was launched 14 years ago, and just 6 weeks ago, the plane maker lauded the fact that the model, also known as the Dreamliner, has reached the milestone of carrying 1 billion passengers. To mark that occasion, the company said the global 787 fleet of more than 1,175 planes has flown nearly 5 million flights, covering more than 30 million flight hours. Well, joining us after bringing you that information, Surjit Panesar, an aviation expert. That information I've just provided, 14 years ago this model of plane was launched, a celebration, over 5 million flights covered. How rare and how tragic is an incident like the one that has just played out in Ahmedabad, Surjit? Hello, Surjit. Just checking that you can hear and you're with us. While we wait for Surjit to connect, just bring you in. This information we are getting through, coming through to us, of course, an evolving situation. More information will come through. 242 people on board this flight that has crashed in Ahmedabad. Global responses are now coming in. We've heard from the UK Prime Minister, the UK Foreign Secretary. We've also heard from the Foreign Minister of France and Russia to India. I believe we now have Surjit Panesar with us, who is an aviation expert. Surjit, thank you for joining us in this moment of tragedy. A brief while ago, I gave some information about the number of flights that a Boeing 787 has taken. How rare is a tragedy of this kind, and how devastating is it that it's impacted a civilian area as well? It seems Surjit is still not with us, so we will continue to bring you more updates as we get them, to bring you in to what is ongoing as we show you these images of buildings that appear to be burning, blackened after an impact on a civilian area by a Boeing 787 aircraft shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, a flight that was scheduled to land in several hours at London, Gatwick. We've heard from Keir Starmer saying that scenes emerging of this London-bound plane carrying many British nationals crashing in India are devastating. We've also had information that King Charles, of course the monarch of Britain, we've heard that he is being kept updated on the developing situation after the Gatwick-bound plane crashed. This according to Buckingham Palace. Surjit Panesar, can I just confirm that you can hear me okay now? We will continue to work on that, but we're getting more reactions in. Now from Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. He has released a statement saying that horrible news of a passenger plane crash in India. My deepest condolences to Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the entire people of India on this tragic day. Our thoughts are with all victims, relatives and close ones in India, the UK, Portugal and Canada. We share our shock and grief on this tragic day. We all pray as many lives to be saved as possible and wish a speedy recovery to those injured. Prayers and hope. Messages coming in at this moment. Rescue operations ongoing at the crash site. But it's not just the 242 people on board this Air India flight AI-171. It's also civilians on the ground. We're showing you visuals now. I'm waiting for confirmation as to whether these are live visuals or not. But showing you damaged buildings, smoke coming from these buildings. This is a tragedy. This is a tragic moment. These images, I believe these are from the hostel. I'm just waiting for confirmation. Are these from the hostel? Yes. These images, we understand that the plane crashed into a hostel that was housing doctors in Ahmedabad. This situation is a unique one. Boeing, in recent weeks, celebrating 5 million flights, covering more than 30 million flight hours. The Boeing 787 aircraft coming down just minutes after takeoff. We've had reports that a mayday call was made from the aircraft shortly after takeoff, but that there was no response afterwards. We've shown you the live images a few moments ago of the scene on the ground. I just want to bring us back to some disturbing but necessary videos that we have of the moments of impact. This tragedy, this tragic moment encapsulated in the moment that this plane went down. Our thoughts, our prayers and hope are with the families of those on the plane, but also those on the ground in the area. These are live visuals. The operation's still ongoing. Rescue efforts ongoing. Attention is not just on the crash site, but also on the residential area. You can see the building behind, clear damage. We wait to get confirmation of the level of damage as the plane impacted onto the ground. There were also explosions and fires. You can see blackened marks on these buildings. This is, of course, an evolving situation, and we will bring you more information as we get it from the relevant bodies. Global reaction is coming in. We've heard from Volodymyr Zelensky, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We've also heard from ambassadors to India of France, Russia. We expect, of course, responses from other world leaders. To provide some context, 169 Indian nationals on board, but also 53 British nationals, 7 Portuguese nationals, and 1 Canadian on board. An extremely devastating moment, an extremely difficult moment. Joining us to discuss this tragedy is Berzin Wagmar, a foreign affairs expert who is joining us from London. Berzin, of course, the perspective in India is one of tragedy, a rescue effort on the ground ongoing, political conversations between the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and top ministers ongoing. A crisis meeting will be taking place. Emergency services will be doing the best they can. But Berzin, you're in London currently. What's the current consensus, given that this flight was heading to London, heading to Gatwick, and we know that 53 British nationals were on board? What can you tell us about the current state on the ground in the UK?
11:30 in the morning here in England, and of course the news would have been received with immense shock and distress by those next of kin who were presumably waiting for what would be a customarily routine flight. Air India flies 6 times a day between India and the United Kingdom from its metropolises in Bombay, Delhi, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Amritsar. So this would have been just another routine flight, but of course it has not come to pass. And it must be recorded as the first crash since privatization took place and Air India returned to the Tatas nearly after half a century. And of course, it would be fruitless to make idle speculative remarks. Suffice to note this, at least as a historian in me, that upon seeing the tragedy unfold on amateur video, which has been made available on social media portals, one couldn't help but notice with disquietude what happened on New Year's Day 1978 to Air India Flight 855, which today, like Air India 171, a few seconds after takeoff from Ahmedabad's runway 2305, plunged and could not necessarily lift. So there was some lift or drag issues that becomes quite apparent. But of course, I must insert again that one must wait for the expertise reports and investigations to come in. But that is apparent, at least, that the aircraft simply did not ascend after the point of rotation from lifting off what would have been a routine takeoff from Ahmedabad's runway 2305. And that reminds me of what took place in Bombay on New Year's Day 1978, when that Air India 747 then, a Dreamliner 787 today, lifted off from Bombay's runway 27 for Dubai, and 2 minutes after takeoff, plunged off the coastline of Bombay near the waters, Arabian Sea, shallow waters, and none survived then too. I'm afraid it would be likely that there would be no survivors today also due to the fuel payload factor. It was a fully fueled aircraft which had just become airborne. But even then, with AI 855, just as with AI 171 today, it's a question of lift. So it could possibly be attributable to some instrument malfunction or human error.
Yes, absolutely. Just to clarify, we haven't had confirmation yet
Exactly.
on any fatalities, and we will wait for confirmation. But of course, that point that Berzin makes shortly after liftoff, the amount of fuel on board will of course be higher. It hasn't burnt off, it hasn't yet been used, and given the time following takeoff before this crash, just moments, minutes, there is a further risk there. I just want to allude to a comment that we've had from the Union Home Minister Amit Shah, who was tweeted saying that pained beyond words by the tragic plane crash in Ahmedabad, the disaster response forces have been quickly rushed to the crash site. Spoken with Gujarat Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel, Home Minister Harsh Shagavi, and the Commissioner of Police Ahmedabad to assess the situation. Berzin, this is an evolving situation. We're showing visuals on a rescue effort that is ongoing and will continue to be ongoing for some time. Of course, the hope and the optimism over potential lives saved from the flights is one thing, but this is a civilian area. We've seen images and videos of damage to buildings. This situation is a rare one and could have catastrophic consequences. What's your thoughts on the potential civilian casualty that might be taking place?
Casualties cannot be discounted. It is another grim reality which must be factored in, regrettably, given the fact that Indian cities are densely populated, and in most cases in urban built-up areas across India, not just Ahmedabad, but elsewhere too, we have human habitation right up to the runway walls in question. So that is always a looming factor of risk hazard that has been pointed out over the years by experts, that urban conurbation buildup is simply a factor with India. So Ahmedabad was no exception in this case as a densely populated city. So that has to be also borne in mind, that these things do take place mercifully rarely, but when they do, it is awful, and the tragedy really comes home in that it involves other uninvolved bystanders too. that is to say people on ground, as in the case of this aircraft, which lifted off, as I said from Ahmedabad's runway 2305, and a few seconds after takeoff, plunged in what is a residential neighborhood, which goes by the name of Shahi Bagh area in the city of Ahmedabad.
Yes, the situation is a tragic one, and more updates are coming through. Just to bring you a statement that we've had in the last few moments from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He has said that the tragedy in Ahmedabad has stunned and saddened us. It is heartbreaking beyond words. In this sad hour, my thoughts are with everyone affected by it. He says he has been in touch with ministers and authorities who are working to assist those affected. I just want to allude to this visual, this disturbing visual that is on screen now, just giving you a representation of the level of catastrophe at play. The explosion, of course, this plane fueled heavily for a long flight from India to the United Kingdom, Ahmedabad to London, and an explosion afterwards. I want to bring you another update that we have had in. Indian Railways have confirmed that they're going to run a special train to evacuate passengers stranded in Gujarat. This because the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport has seen flights cancelled following this devastating tragedy. Confirmation that the railway's disaster management team have reached the spot and that AC train will run from Ahmedabad to Delhi at 11:30, and an AC train will run from Ahmedabad to Mumbai. The situation continuing to evolve. Reactions from world leaders also coming in as well. Berzina, I'm going to come back to you. This tragedy is still unfolding, and it's difficult to talk about the next steps while we know that the scenes on the ground are still so difficult and devastating. But there will be an investigation into this. There will be an investigation as to why this has occurred and why, if there are casualties, they happened. How will an investigation like this take place? What questions will be asked, and who will be asked those questions?
Well, obviously, Boeing will be sending a team out to India, needless to state. Not to mention, Air India will also swing into action. And then there's the question of the Director General of Civil Aviation, DGCA India, which also to whom the final report will be submitted as and when the query concludes, a person to finding what is known as the black box voice recorder. And it is hoped that that would occur as soon as possible. Of course, rescue services and will be at it as we speak, working their way through, obviously, what would be, I regret to say, charred remains of passengers and crew survivors, and also those on ground who have been affected and hit at the point of impact, and extricating through a mass of not just aircraft equipment, wiring, passengers, food carts and the like, and the cockpit to make their way to procure the voice recorder in question, because that would be the best way to allay any suspicion or tensions or any other speculation which could be idle, to realize eventually what were the final tragic moments of AI-171 as it lifted off from runway 2305 Ahmedabad this afternoon. It would give us an idea into virtual time as to what ensued or took place, if it was a distress call or it could have been placed as a mayday call, if at all not, we don't know. And what were the final moments on board on the flight deck, which is why it is absolutely imperative that the rescue teams, which are obviously in action, are able to procure through the debris the cockpit voice recorder in question.
Yes, absolutely, Bazin. I just want to break away for a second as we bring some further international reaction. China's ambassador to India, Su Fei Hong, has said that he is deeply saddened by the tragic plane crash in Ahmedabad. Our hearts go out to the passengers and their families. We stand in solidarity with all of those affected in this difficult time. Also, on the official Iran in India X account, the Embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran in New Delhi say they express their deepest sorrow and heartfelt condolences over the tragic crash of passenger aircraft in Ahmedabad. We extend our sympathies to the government and people of India, especially to the bereaved families of the victims. Our thoughts and prayers are with them during this difficult time. We also wish a swift and full recovery to all those who have been injured in this heartbreaking incident. We stand with the people of India in this moment of sorrow. This is a moment of sorrow and a moment of tragedy. The visuals that we have been bringing you, the live visuals from the scene, also the videos from the moment that the crash took place, providing you a clear understanding of the extremity of this situation. If you are just joining us, 242 people on board a civilian passenger flight which has crashed shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Of those 242 people on board, 169 are Indian nationals, 53 British, 7 Portuguese and 1 Canadian. This situation is extreme, not just because of the number of people on this plane, which has led to this explosion you can see right now, but also because it landed and crashed in a civilian area. We understand that it crashed on a hostel which was housing doctors. We've shown you live visuals of the rescue emergency efforts on the ground. Charred buildings can be seen with smoke rising from them, debris spread across the ground with smoke and dust filling the air. To bring you another breaking update, Union Home Minister Amit Shah, Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu, Minister of State for Civil Aviation Muralidhar Mohol and the DGCA have all left for Ahmedabad by special plane. This is an evolving situation. This flight took off from Ahmedabad at 1:39 p.m. Indian Standard Time, and a very short while later, just minutes later, crashed. The situation is still unfolding, and we will bring you in with all updates as we get them. And one of those now, Ahmedabad Police, the city police, have issued an emergency number. If you are in the area and you do need emergency support, that number is 0792 562 0359. The situation is dire. The plane, fueled for a long journey, 9 to 10 hour flight approximately, from India to the United Kingdom. The explosion that we've shown you, made worse by that fuel. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone, the loved ones of everyone who may have been affected by this. Global reactions, of course, coming in. We've read out statements from many people, just to reiterate some of those. We'll start with Prime Minister Narendra Modi first. The tragedy in Ahmedabad has stunned and saddened us. It is heartbreaking beyond words. In this sad hour, my thoughts are with everyone affected by it. Thierry Matou, the French ambassador to India, says France is deeply saddened by reports of the plane crash in Ahmedabad. Our thoughts are with the victims and their loved ones. Russia's ambassador to India, Denis Alipov, heartbreaking news coming from Ahmedabad. My heartfelt sympathies to the families and near ones of the victims, and to all Indian people and the government of India over this tragic major catastrophe. Comments as well from British Prime Minister and British Foreign Secretary David Lammy, 53 of those on board British nationals. Berzin Wagmar, I will come back to you now. A tragedy on this scale, devastation to potentially hundreds of civilians, the families that will be affected and impacted, an investigation expected, is difficult. Berzin Wagmar, coming to you, with a potential loss of life of this scale, what do you think will be done, and what can be a reaction from this, not just from Air India but also from Boeing, whose plane has gone down? Of course, investigations will take place, but will there need to be some accountability for a tragedy of this scale?
There will be some question, needless to say, accountability from all stakeholders involved: Air India, Boeing, and the Director General of Civil Aviation. That is the federal agency in India which oversees all civil aviation operations, as well as Airports Authority of India, AAI, who runs Ahmedabad Airport among other airports across India. That's the first point to mention. And of course, what would have been a routine flight, in fact, which, as you mentioned, just departed from Ahmedabad's runway 2305 at lunchtime, 20 to 2 this afternoon, Indian Standard Time, and was expected at London Gatwick at 6:25 this evening, would have been a routine flight. In fact, 2 hours into the flight as we speak, just now it would have been over Iranian airspace, northwest track bound for London Gatwick. And of course, that unfortunately has not come to pass. It's currently just coming up to 10 to noon in England here as I speak, so the aircraft would have been wheels down at 6:25, all being well. Obviously, what would have been a routine flight, but which has clearly not occurred. And also, one must bear in mind, as I've mentioned earlier, that in Air India's 80 plus years of operations since its inception in 1932, this is one of its most tragic events. Of course, 242 have perished today, as did 213 in a near similar Air India crash, which I might mention for your viewers who are just joining us now. That took place on New Year's Day 1978, when that Dubai-bound Air India 747 Jumbo departed Bombay and a few seconds after takeoff plunged just off Bombay's coastline into the shallow waters of the Arabian Sea, and none survived then too. That was due to an instrument malfunction and a question of human error, as it was made out to be, but primarily instrument malfunction. So that is eerily reminiscent to one when you see amateur video footage which has been mounted on social media portals of today's crash of Air India 171, in that the aircraft simply did not lift as is expected upon point of rotation after clearing the runway, and it simply did not ascend and banked and made a low drag thrust and finally plunged to the ground into the residential area in question. That would seem evident from what we see of its final fatal grim moments.
Yes, absolutely. Berzin, an extremely tragic event and tragic moment. I do just want to clarify, we haven't had confirmation of casualties yet, and I want to be cautious as we talk about that. The situation is clear, the devastation, the explosion that has taken place, the civilian area in which this flight has landed. We're not being naive, but until we have confirmation, I do want to be cautious. We've had reports that injured people have been taken to local hospitals. No clarity as to whether those were people who were on the flight or locals in Ahmedabad on the ground. This is a tragedy and questions will be asked. Bazin, as we continue to show live visuals of these rescue efforts, is there any hope for survivors? Is there any hope for the families of loved ones on the plane? How will a rescue effort like this be carried out given the level of explosion that we've seen? We're showing parts of metalwork and bits of plane that are being dragged out. Is there optimism?
But I'm afraid the fuel factor makes it practically impossible to discern if anybody could have survived on board. Survivors on the ground at the point of impact is another matter, and one sincerely, fervently hopes that there are survivors on ground at the point of impact through the debris and shrapnel, which can, if they can be extricated. But insofar as the 242 passengers, including 10 crew members, were on board, I fear the worst may have come to pass. Although one waits for an official announcement, I'm patently cognizant of that fact too. And I wouldn't wish to indulge in idle speculation on air. But it is the fuel factor, a fully loaded aircraft just airborne. And from what one gathers now of assorted news sources, I may just inform, because this is now public information, that apparently from the flight deck, a mayday call was made to Ahmedabad ATC air traffic control departure to the control tower. So this must have been just a fraction of a second or such after takeoff. A mayday call was made from the flight deck, is what assorted news agencies are reporting.
Yes.
The said aircraft in question made.
Yes, we've had that information.
There was some issue on board.
Yes, absolutely. And just to reiterate on that information, the information we've received is that a mayday call was put out just after takeoff, but then signal was lost from air traffic control to the plane, and there was no response after that initial mayday call until the plane crash landed. The situation is a devastating one. To bring you in on what is happening, I will just bring you back if you are joining us. Actually, let's now go to Keith Vaz, who is joining us, a former UK minister, joining us from London. Keith, thank you for joining us. I wish you were here to speak with us at a time that wasn't so tragic, at a moment that wasn't so devastating. Can we just get your initial thoughts to what has unfolded today in Ahmedabad?
Well, Joshua, I think everyone is shocked, horrified, as you say, devastated by this news that has come out of Ahmedabad. This is an Air India flight carrying people to Gatwick, London's second largest airport, with, I would imagine, predominantly people from India who are coming to the UK. We don't know anything beyond that, their local origins, but obviously Ahmedabad is the city that is best known to people in my home city of Leicester, which sometimes is described as the mini Gujarat, so we don't know who's on there. It would be wrong to speculate, but there is a strong connection between Leicester and Ahmedabad. Of course, for many, many years, people have campaigned for a direct flight between the capital of the Gujarat and London, and therefore there will be people travelling directly on this flight back to the UK. But I can't imagine what it must be like for people who know that their relatives were on this flight and who are making the journey from places like Leicester, Manchester, and other parts of London to Gatwick Airport in South London to receive their relatives.
Yes.
I think
Keith, just to bring in, sorry to interject there, just to bring some clarity, we've had reports and official reports that 53 British nationals were on board, 169 Indian nationals, 7 Portuguese people and 1 Canadian national as well. So there will be potentially dozens of families in Britain who are going to be directly impacted by this, potentially with loved ones on this flight. We wait for confirmation, but as Berzine, our previous guest, was saying, the level of fuel on board, rescue efforts are ongoing, and optimism is there, but there is concern. Keith, before I come back to you, I have a couple of quick updates. We've had a report come in that the plane has crashed into the hostel mess of the BJ Medical College. 20 students have reportedly been hospitalised. To bring you another update, we've had further confirmation that it was the BJ Medical College hostel mess in Meghani Nagar that was struck by this plane. We are now getting reports that many MBBS students have potentially lost their lives. We will wait for complete confirmation of this, but an incident of this tragedy, an incident of this nature, we are expecting devastating loss of life. The first bit of information we're receiving about people on the ground losing their lives, MBBS students, the plane crashing directly into the BJ Medical College UG hostel. I'll just bring you now a post that we have had from the US Embassy of India on behalf of the US mission in India. We are deeply saddened by the tragic plane crash in Ahmedabad. Our heartfelt condolences and thoughts are with the families who have been affected by this horrific tragedy. We stand with India in this time of grief. Keith, I will come back to you. Of course, you have more knowledge than most about politics and ministerial duties. What will be the response now from the United Kingdom and the government, Keir Starmer's cabinet? We've heard from him, we've heard from David Lammy in statements. But how will they work with India to help assist in not just cleaning up this tragedy, but helping in investigate it?
Joshua, you're absolutely right. It's very important that the operations, obviously we have acknowledged the statements of the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary. What needs to happen now, and it should have happened by now, certainly from when I was a Foreign Minister, is that the British Deputy High Commission in Mumbai should have opened an emergency line. The best way of checking this out, I don't know that they've done this, but this is the normal response. Go onto the website of the Indian High Commission, British High Commission in Mumbai. There should be an emergency number for people to ring. Obviously, Air India will have its own emergency number, but the British response with 53 British nationals, and you mentioned Portuguese citizens, they are more likely than not knowing where this plane is coming from, to also be people who have connections, strong connections with the UK, because many of the Daman and Diu community who live in Leicester do have Portuguese passports, but live in the UK. So the primary response should be an emergency number on the British High Commission website in Mumbai. It should be the first thing that's on there, where people can ring and find out what's happening. The second thing is officials from Mumbai should be flying immediately to the nearest airport to Ahmedabad. Obviously, Ahmedabad airport is suspended, so they can either go by road or they can go to a nearby airport and be there in order to assist those who have gone to the vicinity, who know people who've got on that plane. Similarly, at Gatwick Airport, Air India will by now have set up an emergency number so people can contact them. Some people will just go to Gatwick from the UK, even though they're watching this news. It's the natural instinct of people to do this. So hopefully Air India at Gatwick has also taken emergency precautions. There are protocols in place to make sure that the relatives are given information, and you are giving us updates in real time on NewsX, Joshua. But it is hoped, now that we have all this modern technology, that the numbers that people have been given when they book their flights are now being contacted. So people are being just given information about what is happening. Nobody has final figures. It'll be totally wrong to speculate. But from the point of view of the 53 Britons, the 7 Portuguese, and also all the Indians who are coming, Indian nationals coming to Gatwick to meet relatives who live in the UK, this is going to affect, as you say, thousands of people. It may only be 220 people or so on the flight, but thousands of people are going to be affected, as well as the relatives of those who are at medical college, who did not expect when they were in there today to have to face this kind of tragedy. So, one, the emergency services have to do their work. The Chief Minister has acted very quickly. I'm sure your aviation minister in India is doing everything that he can.
Yes.
But the response of the British should be to provide an emergency number. You should be able to ring up the British High Commission and get that number.
Absolutely. Keith, Vaz, thank you ever so much for joining us. Of course, ramifications not just in India, but global ramifications following this disaster, this tragic event. We will continue to bring you more updates from it and across the world very soon.